Alright, gotta shout out to Solar and ByuN. These guys were ready with the videos immediately. If I didn't have if I had stream delay on, we would have been able to just get started sooner. But because I have no stream delay, I'd already started the ads, right? So I had to ask them to wait. But they were ready to freaking play, man. They were not messing around. Solar in the upper right-hand corner of the map. ByuN in the bottom left-hand corner of the map. 2,000 atmospheres for map number 1. As you do have our Overlord of Solar making its way down towards the south side of the map. So Overlord of Solar on the way down to the south here as we get this game ready to roll onwards. So yeah, Overlord making its way southwards. Hatchery is coming up from Solar as well. Yeah, just getting this extractor building and so on and so forth. Intrigued to see what ByuN's going to come out with. ByuN's coming off a pretty rough loss. He played against Parton in a little best-of-9 show match. And will ended up losing that, I believe, 1-5. So he's coming off of that today. Hopefully can turn it around and do a little better in today's group. There's obviously a tough lineup. Solar, Zest, kind of titans that you don't want to mess around with for the most part. So we'll see what ByuN opens with and brings us on 2,000 atmospheres. It is a reactor first, so already a marine heavy opening to start. Going to be just bypassing that early Reaper. Something we're, again, seeing a lot more of in this matchup. And, you know, it's funny, but the Reaper is really a staple of the matchup for a long time. Literally for years, Reaper-based openings in TvZ have been a thing. And nowadays, it's almost, and every now and then, so it wasn't like this is just a new thing. It's like every now and then people would go through phases of maybe not building the Reaper. But nowadays, more than I'd say ever before, we're seeing a lot of these one marine into reactor openings or just straight up reactor openings where we skip the Reaper. A few builds that even bypass Hellions as well. I don't think this will be one of those. I think this factory is going to swap onto the reactor now and build Hellions. It's just crazy how much of an early game shift this matchup is starting to see. You know, a matchup which has otherwise been truly a well-defined matchup for the first few minutes of the game. You know, if nothing else, we pretty much always expected, outside of the era of 2-on-1s, we always expected it to be a Reaper into reacted Hellions, and we just go from there. Certainly just going to take the Watchtower as our couple of queens. We'll be setting up at the front. Link speed building up, going to be finishing soon. Hellions are being set up with a medevac, so looks like we'll just have a pretty baseline Hellion drop. There's not going to be an armory, so we're not going to morph in Hellbats. The other options, we lift with the Marines and we Marine drop and then Hellion run by as well. Looks like that might be the option. Kind of feels like this is the sort of build you would have an armory for. And he's got the gas to have started an armory too. He would even be able to start Stim behind him. Maybe not Stim and a Liberator. I was going to say a Liberator is actually probably a pretty likely follow-up from this, and he does start that Liberator now as well, as I was saying it. So he wouldn't be able to start Stim and Lib and the Armory, but he could have maybe had an Armory and a Lib, or he maybe could have had an Armory and Stim. As it stands, these Hellions are actually staying at home. He's just sending the Marines across and going to try and utilize these Marines as their, as a way to deal damage early. These few Marines unloading. Again, with that Liberator coming on, it really is just going to end up being very harassment heavy. You're going to have Hellions going one way, Marines going another in the medevac, and then the Liberator with the potential to siege a mineral line as well. It's going to be a high action or a quick-paced set of aggression coming through here in the near future as our Stim Pack continuing up from ByuN, and a couple of barracks still just on the way down. Medevac all the way around the right as the few Hellions wanting to try and get onto the Ling Bane. A couple of drones going down. Here comes the Medevac that will unload toward the corner. Queen and the Spore going to put some damage out, and the Medevac taking a lot of damage. So, most successful unit of all was the Liberator, as Solar actually deals with the multi-pronged harass better than ByuN does setting it up. So, well handled by Solar. I mean, got to give him credit for that. As to mention a bit about Solar's ZVT, Solar's ZVT has really been in a very cool state lately as well. I feel like he's been pretty successful on a fairly constant basis. And it feels like he really got this matchup figured out a bit. He had that victory against Maru in the... Oh, what was that tournament that we casted, guys? Solar won against Maru in. Someone was just commenting on my YouTube earlier today and talking about Zerg being OP or something. Semi-final. Oh, next SC2 Masters. God, that was actually a while ago at this point. But, yes, of the NetEase Esports X Masters. That was a while ago, actually. But, like, you know, examples like that really have shown that Solar's ZVT, for the most part, is kind of being in a good place. And he's being really good at kind of a lot of Ling Bane heavy styles into those lurkers and stuff. This game, we're going to get to see him playing a bit of Ling Bane Muta. One of the scariest parts of being a Zerg and ZVT is if you can play multiple different compositions well. If you can play Ling Bane into like Hive Tech, as well as you can play Ling Bane Muta, as well as you can play kind of Ling Bane faster lurkers. If you can play all those different styles, the Terran can never really just play a style that hard counters your style, right? And that's just going to keep the Terran guessing. So in this situation, ByuN's been making some tanks. Those tanks are still going to be okay early, but against Ling Bane Muta, you're typically going to want to move away from tanks and into toward a Widow Mine setup, get that drilling claws up and running, and play the game from there. The Widow Mines can obviously help with AoE onto the Mutas, and they're just much more mobile than tanks. They burrow and unburrow a little bit faster than tanks are going to be sieging and unsieging. So it's just a more fluid composition from ByuN that would work better. So we'll see when he realizes this, and we'll see if he does switch away from tanks. The one thing that is good with tanks is obviously some of the timing pushes. You get to that high tank count, and you get one big push through the center. The biggest issue with that is if you do get slowed down by mutas, and you do get kind of caught off, and the mutas pick off a couple tanks, and that one army goes down, the moment you lose that one army is typically the moment where everything else begins to go very well, as Ling Bane Muta Force can start rolling down here. These couple of Banes want to try and crash on in. Not quite able to just yet, as Marines will peel back over to the left-hand side. Muta's back to the middle. And again, melee upgrades coming through, the +1 flyer attack coming through. All of these units rallying up together. We do see more of this Marine tank force about to join up on the watchtowers on the bottom right. A few Marines on the watchtower as well. Just going to help to make sure that once more, those mutas are being kept back at bay. So yeah, this is the whole idea of playing siege tanks, right? Pushes like this one, the tank gets set up, you've got one big push from one direction, and you're more than anything just looking to really overpower. And honestly, ByuN might be on track to do that. He's actually ahead on supply already, as Solar will be setting up some units in the center. I mean, he has to go soon because this hatchery is already falling. If he loses this hatchery, what happens then? Well, let's hold that thought and first of all watch these Banelings do nothing at all. The Banes are just unsuccessful. Lings from the other side, now some extra Banes showing up, but Solar's just going to tap out the game as ByuN's force is just going to be a bit too much. That is going to be GG. Please do consider hitting that subscribe button, using your Twitch Primes on the channel, because you will be not only supporting me as a streamer, but also supporting this very tournament and its prize pool. If you're really enjoying the tournaments and you just want to directly support the tournaments, you can check out the Patreon page as well, patreon.com/WardiTV. If you're in the Twitch chat, !Patreon will take you there too. Anything you pledge on Patreon, 100% of it goes into tournament prize pools. Right now on Patreon, we're raising between $500 and $600 a month, and that is going directly into tournament prize pools. So again, the last 2-3 months of Patreon have all been a build-up into making this Summer Championship prize pool that little bit more substantial, a little bit more enticing, and allowing us to make a bit more of an interesting, fun, and longer format event out of it. So do check that out as well if you're enjoying the tournament and would like to support. It's one of the best things you can do to keep the Starcraft rolling. It doesn't just support me, allow me to make content, it supports the players that make this beautiful game so beautiful. Wouldn't be a beautiful game if the players weren't doing things with it, right? Top left is ByuN, bottom right is Solar for game number 2 of this best of 3 series. Just a very quick mention then, just because I got this update during Game 1, and just as Game 2 starts and not much too crazy happens, I'll just quickly explain this to you guys as well. Unfortunately, Armani, after playing against Zest, has messaged me and he says, sorry, I'm just really not feeling very well. I need to go to sleep. I need to go to bed. I just can't focus on the game properly right now. So, Armani will be forfeiting the lower bracket, and that's obviously absolutely fine. Obviously, we don't want players just to come out and forfeit, but he seemed pretty genuinely, like, down and pretty ill, so... He's going to be forfeiting that lower bracket match, and we'll just basically lose a best of 3 off of today's schedule. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up that the matchup after this one will be the winner's match, and then the loser of that will play the loser of this, because the loser of this is essentially just getting a free win in the lower bracket. So, just a little update there, just on Armani. I will still give him his $25 prize pool for participating. He still gave us a fun initial best of 3 of the day as well and stuff, so... We don't want to, like I say, punish him or anything for just feeling ill. So he will still get paid out. And yeah, hopefully he does feel better soon. I mean, Armani is someone who has played in my events for years and years and years, guys. I mean, he played in some of my first tournaments back in 2012, 2013. So he's been playing my events a long time. He's not the kind of guy to lose a series and be like, screw this. Yeah, Wardy, I feel ill. I can't play anymore, you know? So, yeah. If you're smart, you forfeit this game, so you get guaranteed top 2. I feel like that's not how it works, because if you forfeit this game, you get a free win in the lower match, which means you would still just be top 3. And then you wouldn't have a... but then you wouldn't have a chance to play in the winner's match. So... doesn't quite work. Doesn't quite work. Math is hard. Well, it ain't easy. Cat showed us that on DreamHack yesterday. I went back and watched the bit where Cats did math, because I didn't see it because it was during my break, so I was actually having a break for once, and yeah, it was kind of amusing. Hey, what's up, Parabytes? Thank you so much for the 28-month resub. We're seeing a similar opening in this game as to the last. I believe the only difference here was maybe ByuN went Marine into Reactor instead of Reactor first. I think that's the only difference we've had here. I don't think there's been anything else going on just yet. For game number 2. He does grab an initial Overlord kill. And he's got the Hellions Poison on the left-hand side. Last game, ByuN really just seemed to snowball out of nowhere. I didn't even really think he took any fights or had any major harassment that went so massively in his favor that he was meant to just sort of straight up win the game, and yet he did kind of just straight up win the game. As these few Marines gonna get surrounded by Lings, so they're just gonna have to lift up there. The Liberator is on the way out. So yeah, I was kind of surprised by how easily ByuN's push just kind of won in the end. Still just not having the proper preparations and not quite the right fights and the right setup to deal with that one big push, which, to be fair, once it got set up, it started doing a lot of damage. It started having those tanks firing and doing very well. As these few Marines are going to push onto the Queen, Hellions helping there as well. Is just going to be seen off. His Gleans wanted to come up as the Lib, but Solar dealing with this well too. So ByuN, same build twice in a row. Why not? If it worked well the first time, why not use it a second time around? And again, still, I mean, he did this last time too, though. Like, he dealt with this initial wave of the aggression pretty well. This Queen's gonna sit and kill the Liberator. Good pull by Solar, calculated. And he does get the Lib kill without losing the Queen. Didn't have to move the Queen around in any sort of fancy way or anything. And obviously the Queen tanking a couple of shots meant that it's a couple of drones that didn't go down instead. So, obviously, if ByuN had known the Liberator was definitely gonna die without killing the Queen, he would have rather than have killed off 2 drones and then the Liberator would have died, and then you actually have something to show for your efforts instead of a low HP Queen, which you're probably not going to get close to again for a while, so it will just regenerate over time. Back at home, ByuN has already got his 3rd CC finishing and all of the extra racks to power up onto the 5 rack setup. And we'll see how aggressive he wants to be from here again. And we'll see if that, this next part of the game is also similar to the first game, as we do force a cancel on the 4th hatchery. So that's a nice win with these Marines in the medevac. So yeah, the next step really is ByuN going to keep on building those siege tanks? Is he going to try and go for a push like that again? If he does, it would be in this topside direction. I imagine he's going to set up around here and push in this direction. It's kind of hard position to flank. You got to go all the way around to get a flank on that, or have these rocks taken down earlier. He could maybe push up here as well, but that's a little bit more committed than just being here. It's an interesting question, because if you get tanks like here and here, you can still hit this base, drop down there. Then you also kind of lock down the position between the base, and I think that part of it's very powerful. He kind of goes for an in-between. He kind of goes topside mostly, but also has a tank high ground too. Solar going to send an immediate counterattack across, realizing that ByuN's already getting into a good position. That 4th base gets cancelled again, and the longer that 4th base is cancelled for, the more trouble Solar will typically walk into against all the rest of this. Sling's going to go running by, and they actually get a good surround on a tank, so another run by looking to be very successful. ByuN has got a couple of tanks working an extractor, and it will fall. So Solar will be denied some gas. He's about to get baneling speed, which will be essential to minimize the amount of tank shots taken on the way into a fight. Without that baneling speed, this just feels unengageable, but now that baneling speed is done, perhaps that all changes. The counterattack was cleaned up, only 2 SCVs lost. So while ByuN hasn't been able to mine comfortably off this base, he also still has a strong work account from it all, as tank's really important right now to get some kills on these banelings. The more banelings you get rid of, the better a time your Marines are going to have. Target fires a couple of banelings down, and now it's just Marines against Lings. And the Lings will back away from that. Just not worth trying to fight those Marines in a corner with the medevac supporting. And once more, ByuN is going to find himself on a bit of a supply lead. Now, Solar's starting a hive and a hydrogen. 2-2 upgrades on the way that ByuN has not started. And ByuN's armory is very late. So his 2-2 massively delayed. So as long as Solar is holding and surviving, I would imagine this is going to continue to go very well for him. I imagine this continues to be a winning setup as Lingbane continues through these couple of Marines. And they'll load back up into that medevac. As medevac's pulling away again. Going to turn it around and go elsewhere. Hive building in the main. Do you have a look at them behind this also? It's going to be finishing up in a few moments. As these few banelings are trying to morph, get caught as well, so that's a good shutdown. Something good to get rid of there, really. Means you don't have to deal with that harassment into your mineral line. Solar has so much money. Is he going to get up to the lurkers? If he can get to lurkers, you've always got to give Solar a good chance to just defend back into the game. Because a lot of Terrans will overcommit into those lurkers when they first come out and believe they can do well against them when they actually can't. So that will be a big question here as this medevac comes back around the upper right-hand side. And our Marine tank force still wanting to press on forward. A couple of creep teamers going down. The Lingbane still coming across. Ooh, a few Banes roll into a tank, and that doesn't do very well for Solar, who still struggles supply-wise. Again, his strength will lie in the tech and the upgrades that are continuing to come through here fairly soon. Marines unloading again. The Ling Hydra continues up this ramp. One tank goes down, the other tank will fall. On the right-hand side, this hatchery is going to be taking a little bit of damage, and these Marines will just sit here as the medevac heals. But when the medevac gets out of energy, he immediately lifts and says, well, no point giving up the Marines. So it does just back it up, and I feel like that's a rather smart decision. Now the first lurkers are coming through. One thing is obviously ByuN's been building tanks all game, so he's going to have... Well, he actually only has 2 tanks, so his tank count isn't that crazy. If you have like a very good tank count against these lurkers, it helps a lot. Especially if the lurkers want to start pushing into you, because then the tanks really, help you to hold those positions a lot of the time. Single circling around the top as Ling's trying to come through. Marines is going to dodge away from that as the bigger drop goes into the main base. A Viper waiting here, I assumed was going to parasitic bomb, but it does parasitic bomb, but it dies off immediately after. And one medevac being bombed down. Probably not the biggest of issues as... Well, actually, those Marines went down faster than I thought. I thought they might be okay. Tell you what, for ByuN initially haven't had a supply lead. That's disappeared very quickly. I imagine that's a lot of the fact to do with that he's gone 1-1 still, fighting against those 2-2 upgrades. Oh, he lost his scan, and he actually lost the ability to kill that final lurker, which initially looked like as though he was just going to run on top of and get rid of no problems. And again, without 2-2, this is not a fight you can win, and ByuN's army continues to just disintegrate here as Solar pushes him back and is going to go swarming across the map. Link surrounding a bit of Marine tank. The Bane's coming through. That tank is continuing to take some shots. The rest of the Hydra's coming through onto that center tower. And these Marines will continue to pick their way through the Zergling. So a few more Lings going down. GG from ByuN. And that is going to be Solar tying this series up at 101. A game where ByuN definitely had... Oh, okay, I'll click a button for 5 cents. I'd spam click at 5 cents a pop. You make millions! Top left-hand side, our red Zerg player from Kaizi Gaming is Solar. Up against the blue town in the bottom right-hand side, it is the Shopify Rebellion's ByuN. Our reminder side for Game 3 is Solar and ByuN will not let us be disappointed, and we'll let this series go to the third map, which we kind of need if we're going to miss out on that lower bracket match due to Armani forfeit and not feeling well. Maybe nice to see these Game 3s and just beef out the day a little bit. We don't want to be done in... No, we don't want to cast for an hour and a half and that's it. Boom, we're done, you know? So, yeah, hoping to stay alive in that regard. As a Protoss player, my heart will go to ByuN no matter win or lose. Why? Because you want to see ByuN get Protoss in the winners match? Is that it? Obviously, Romantic side. Big map. I don't see much surprise in ByuN going reactor first. If that's how he's playing today, reactor first instead of Marine first makes a lot of sense on this one, so not surprised to see that, honestly. As we do just have our spawning pool. Be finishing soon. Couple of Marines building on the barracks. Gonna see the factory is coming through, and I do have our Overlord of Solar out around the far right hand side. There's a couple of additional Marines going in, and those Queens continue up as well. I wonder if ByuN really does just use the same build as the last 2 games back to back to back, though. Because it has been pretty much the same idea, right? 6 or 7 Marines in a medevac, joined by some Hellions, joined by a Liberator eventually. So, I mean, it sets up in the same way. Will it execute exactly the same? I kind of want to see it mixed up a bit just because... Well, I mean, I feel like the actual opening itself is doing fine, so maybe it's not that much of an issue to just repeat yourself here. A little bit uninteresting for us, though, so I kind of hope it mixes up just so we have some different stuff to talk about. Otherwise, more of the same of what we've already seen, right? Overlord speed. Already building on the main base, so bringing that up as our starport is about to complete out of ByuN. This lone Marine just drawing off to that right side. Overlord is hanging around, and we are going to be seeing an armory of ByuN going down here as well. It's just getting that set up in the back of the main base. I like it. It was one of the things I suggested, in the previous game, right? Where it's like, it kind of feels like you got the gas, you could start up the armory. And I didn't say out loud, and now I wish I had, because I was like, well, maybe, one of the ways you could switch it up while I'm still making it look similar is to add an armory and to make this a Hellbat attack. Solar's gonna see it. He already seems to know what's up because he saw no tech lab, so he immediately started a spine crawler. Didn't need to see the armory to figure out that this is gonna be Hellbats. And as ByuN comes across the map, he'll be on a bit of a time to get some damage done, and he will want some damage off of this. His worker count is that little bit lower. He's not building SCVs as consistently as he might be with some of the more macro-focused builds. As he push forward, there's actually an overlord there that would supply block Solar initially. If the Marines could have found the target fire onto it for a while. Medevac backs away. Still targeted by the Queens, though, and it will go down, so that's the end of healing. I think that's going to be the end of this attack. Well, ByuN in general, everything goes down. And this Hellbat attack was just seen at the right time by Solar. The Overlord speed and investment he had to make, but an investment that absolutely paid off in the game where ByuN just ramps up that aggression a little bit further. As we are going to be taking our Liberator now across the map. So the result of this is that you spent money on the armory, so the Lib was a little bit later, and I believe the Stim is a little bit later than what we've been seeing in the previous games. So those are the main things to think about here. While Solar has obviously cleaned up all of those Hellions and Marines as well, so there's no more continued aggression out of those units that have otherwise been around for a little bit longer than what we're seeing right now too. So all of that to kind of keep in mind with this. Liberate all the way into the main. Some Hellions still around who wanted to poke on the right side. I'm just going to get forced back by the Spore Crawler. Took a moment to unsiege, so it does take a hit. And just re-sieging the main, but the Queen is going to, well, dodge out of range anyway. That's going to be it. It's a bit of a draw and pull force, but not much gained when you consider what sometimes the Liberator is able to do. I think you got to say that that's a good defense once again from Solar. He's really been the one to just pull that defense together a few times over at this point. Well, that's morphed back into Hellions, and I would imagine a Creep Tumor is a prime target. Yeah, a few shots off on Zerglings as well. Back at home, ByuN 3rd CC, also a little bit later than what we've been used to in the last few games. Just everything slowed down because of the commitment to the armory and the Hellbats that didn't really pay off here. It's something that ByuN's going to be kind of, it's one of those, why did I do it? Why did I try the Hellbats? I should have listened to Tastosis. These things never work. And instead, he just believed in his Hellbats anyway, and, well, it didn't work. Hellions put a few shots out. They're going to turn it around and come back along the left a little bit. In general, just remaining active, but now low HP. It's time for them to go back home and get repaired. Also, could just be defense against the run by as the main army moves out. Nice to have something at home that can deal with lings running into your base. Because if you don't have that, you generally do fall into a little bit of trouble. So it's nice to get that up fairly early on. Gun moves forward, and that tank will siege. A couple creep teamers already being picked off. But Shield going to be finishing soon as well, so ByuN is really going to continue to power on up here. Now we've got plenty of lings making their way to the right-hand side. We're going to already morph in a bunch of Banes as well. They're going to rally up towards this base, so going to be a massive counter-attack. I mean, ByuN's got so many units just sat at home, not really doing anything. The tank not going to stop the Banes getting up this ramp. ByuN, are you going to do anything about this on the other side? Can you take advantage of so many of these Zerg units being over here? Yeah, some units that have returned back from the left, and they actually will do a good job of holding this off. And he still does have the position on the left if he can somehow find a way to use it. I get it, it's difficult. It ain't easy, but he would put himself into a wonderful position if he was able to make some use of this. And he does move down the ramp now. I wonder if now Solar's just got everything collected back together, though, and can maybe just wrap around this and just create a victory. He's actually going to get a wrap around just before ByuN's army on the bottom side shows up. I imagine ByuN's game here begins to be about, well, target firing Banelings, and then maybe getting these medevacs down to these reinforcements. It was a good time for Solar to move in to clean out. ByuN still made a decent trade out of it, and when you look at resources lost, it's turned heavily into ByuN's favor from what was not a good start for him. His upgrades are much more on point this time as well, not delayed on the armory because he had the Hellbat, so 2-2 started nice and cleanly off of the 1-1 finishing. And that smooth transition helps a lot compared to the previous game, where being down in upgrades definitely put him on the worst end of things as well, and create a lot of trades where Solar was able to really take advantage and push himself forward. Marines pushing through to do what they can. Lingbane still set to counterattack. What it will be interesting is usually the Zerg likes to work down the left side of the map for their future bases. So in this game, the left side being heavily stopped by ByuN means Solar's kind of got to go to the right side instead. Just kind of wonder how that ends up looking in the long term and see if that's something that ByuN can maybe punish. The fact that Solar has that right side fourth base instead of the left side. So at the moment, ByuN's probably more concerned about dealing with this. These Lings finally do get turned away. He's still trying to pressure in over here. These Marines have been putting in overtime thus far. Pantry is taking quite a lot of damage, and the 11 extra Banelings morphing 20 Zerglings on the way through. And Marines is going to continue to pull on back. Tank fire onto some of these Lings. The Hellbat trying to stay in the front as well. And Bane's still taking some hits. Finally, everything cleaned out. There'll be a little drop over to the natural. Suddenly, ByuN feels like his macro hasn't been quite there, though, because he's down 50 army supply. Well, 50 supply, 20 workers, 30 army. Fourth base not quite ready yet either, so finally ByuN gets cleaned up, and with that cleanup, Solar really looks as though he might just have a shot at coming across the map to maybe try and win the game. It's definitely going to be a interesting couple of moments. Lurkers are on the way up as well. That Seismic Spines not being far from finishing is something which really tells you as well that ByuN's on a bit of a timer. And if those Lurkers get out, he's going to want more than just double tank production. He's going to have to start thinking about the Liberators, the Ghosts, all that goodness, because yeah, it's going to be kind of a big deal as Marines push up to the top side. Tanks are going to be sieging here, and well, they get caught without being sieged. So unfortunately for ByuN, this game gets further and further away from him, as it looks as though Solar is going to make the ZVT his after a game one that fell away from him very quickly. He bounced back strong in this game 2 and game 3, and he really just looked like the dominant player for the rest of the series after that initial loss. A very strong bounce back, as ByuN will not even let the Lurkers siege. He knows what's happening here. GG's. Solar 2-1.